The civil trial against Donald Trump starts and the jury has been selected. Now, it's a civil trial. It's not a criminal trial. Like many of the other criminal trials we've been covering here, Trump just got indicted. We're going to see that there are probably other indictments coming here soon as June. But in this case, it's a civil case relating back to an old criminal allegation. And it is the R word. It's the word that we try not to say here on YouTube because they demonetize you and it turns into a big thing. But it's an R word, and it is alleged that in 1995, okay, many years ago, there was a department store assault. Donald Trump went in there. This woman, E. Jean Carroll, was somebody who was in the media, and they sort of recognized each other, and something went down in a department store changing room. And we'll take a look at what is happening, of course, today as the trial unfolds. But this case sat around mostly dormant until Donald Trump became a threat, and then people resurrected it. Certain people wanted to identify very specific plaintiffs who could go and engage in lawfare against Donald Trump to sideline him in the courts, to cause a never-ending waterfall of bad news coming his direction. And so they found somebody, this woman, E. Jean Carroll, who is not even hardly competent, in my opinion. Based on what we have seen from her, she seems like she doesn't remember a lot of these details. She was calling it kind of an exciting adventure kind of a thing until it happened. A very weird ordeal. And her deposition was strange because in her deposition, she said that this lawsuit was not being funded by anybody, but we learned that it was, in fact, being funded by this guy, Reid Hoffman, a billionaire founder of LinkedIn. The same guy who has created all sorts of, well, at least two other organizations dedicated to stopping Republicans because he hated Donald Trump. We know that George Conway, another TDS Max extremist, was the person who met with E. Jean Carroll, convinced her to file her claim long after the fact, and Roberta Kaplan was the lawyer that he referenced. So they're just assembling a little litigation team, and a billionaire is funding the whole thing, and it's been going on for years now, and it all relates back to a 1995 allegation. We kind of think we know when the timeline is, but we'll get into it as the trial unfolds. So the whole thing has been another witch hunt, another lawfare that was instituted to go after Donald Trump. And the question is, what can we get into in trial? And previously here, we've covered some of the last minute filings when Alina Abba, Trump's lawyer, said that this disclosure was dishonest. In other words, E. Jean Carroll, during her deposition, didn't tell the truth. The truth was later discovered, and Reid Hoffman turned out to be the founder or the funder of all of this litigation. Very expensive. So Alina wants to talk about this stuff, as you can imagine, in trial. She wants to bring it to the judge's attention and say, Your Honor, the jurors should hear about this. There was a motion by Trump's lawyers. They wanted to bring up this litigation and the funding of the litigation, because you can imagine if there's a highly partisan funder who is backing the litigation, maybe that makes the entire litigation a little bit biased. Maybe it's not about getting Miss Carroll compensation for an assault that may or may not have occurred. It's more about turning a grind, right? Having an axe to grind against the political opponent and using litigation to do that. You certainly want to be able to bring that up and say, who has been paying for this for all of these years? All of this legal work, all of this is done on contingency basis, but it still is expensive. Somebody's got to fund it. Lawyers don't work for free. So Alina and the Trump's team, they wanted to bring this up, but the judge is kind of holding it until further proceedings. He says, on April 20th, Miss Carroll moved in limine, so sort of to limit, to preclude. These are preliminary motions, but they're kind of to limit or to encourage, to allow something or to limit something. They're preliminary motions that take place before a trial to make sure that the trial moves forward in a particular manner without having to get into it in front of the jury. What happened here is E. Jean Carroll is suing Trump. Trump and his defense, they want to bring up evidence about this litigation funding. So E. Jean Carroll filed a motion in limine to preclude, to limit, to stop Trump from offering any evidence or making an argument with respect to the funding. Now, this morning, Trump filed extensive papers in opposition, and the judge is saying, Ms. Carroll, you may wish to reply to this. So you said, don't talk about the funding. Trump says, we definitely have to talk about the funding. You may want to respond to the request to talk about the funding, and you should deliver that no later than April 26. So until that time, Okay, April 26th, which is tomorrow. And the trial just started, so we had opening arguments today. Until that time, as we get a ruling, neither party shall make any reference to litigation funding in the presence of the jurors. So we're going to hold that and come back to a conclusion on that later. But let's talk about the jury now, because we do have a jury that has been impaneled. And NBC News had just a quick breakdown on the jury. And we can see here, jury selection started late on Tuesday morning in federal court, just blocks from where Trump was arraigned this month with Alvin Bragg and Tishy Latish James. This month on criminal charges, Trump has pleaded not guilty to those charges. But today, the judge settled on a jury of 6 men and 3 women by early afternoon, which I think is a good thing for Trump. 6 men and 3 women. Much better than 6 women and 3 men in a case involving allegations of the R. I think that if you did a general cross-section of favorability ratings of Trump and anything closely related to Trump, I would guess that the men would be likely to be more favorable than the females as a general rule. Broad strokes here. But if I was representing Trump, I would be pretty happy with that number, just that number alone. Although Trump was not present in the courtroom for jury selection, he was still a presence in the courtroom. When the judge presiding over the case, U.S. District Judge Lewis Kaplan, asked potential jurors, they said, "Is there anything, ladies and gentlemen, in this case about the nature of this case or the parties, Trump, that would make it difficult for you to give a just and impartial verdict?" And 10 people, they just sprung out of their chairs. At least they're honest. 10 out of 48 stood. They just sprung right up. They're like, "Oh yeah, I hate Trump." And the judge dismissed all of them. So they all got the boot out of there. This was another order that came out. This is kind of an interesting filing, you can see. Trump is in a unique position because he is just a regular defendant in this case, right? It's Donald Trump, but he's also a former president. And we also have some interesting arguments that you can make on behalf of a former president that maybe you can't make on behalf of a regular civilian defendant. And so we're always curious as to if they'll exercise those things. A filing about depositions and objections. So the parties got together, right? Trump sat for a deposition and E. Jean Carroll sat for a deposition. And the question was, can certain parts of the deposition essentially, come in, or can they argue over these things, or, what they're just divvying up the depositions, and they are making objections as to whether those bits can be used. And so here you see there's a whole bunch of them. The judge is going to defer some of these objections till later times. They're going to preserve the objections for appeal, but the judge is going to overrule them. Just they say, hey, we're making these objections. They know they're going to get overruled. That one was sustained. And so the judge, a lot of this stuff is being hashed out right now, and it will come out in trial. I'm just sharing this with you so you see sort of the structure of how this works. Judge and the defense and the plaintiff, they'll submit lists, and then the judge will rule on them bit by bit. Now, let's go in and see what actually happened at the trial. So the case is E. Jean Carroll versus Donald Trump, Southern District of New York. And we remember our friend Inner City Press at Inner City Press, who does great coverage there out of the Southern District of New York. And we were with Inner City Press for the GM trial, and he did a great job there reporting on behalf of that trial. And so they were there early this morning, and they were picking the jury, and we fast forward through jury selection, and they read out the names. The numbers are 10, 48, 44, and so on. And they get their lunch. So the lunch breaks. They're going to resume at 2:45, and we're back right after lunch. Judge Kaplan is back in the courtroom, and he tells Trump's lawyer, hey, we're not moving the lectern. All right. He starts to move the lectern around, and he says, all right, I'm not going to move it. I'm not going to move it. And the judge says, I somehow thought you'd see it my way. Don't you touch my lectern. So the jury enters, and Judge Kaplan starts to explain to the jury a little bit about how this trial is going to proceed. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been chosen for a very serious duty here today. First, questions and objections that you hear by lawyers, they are not evidence, just so you understand. And says Miss Carroll seeks to receive money damages in this claim. It's not a criminal trial. Says Mr. Trump has not been charged criminally for the conduct. She alleges battery. And we're not just talking about the little bunny that powers your radio, We're also saying that battery is the unjustified touching of another person. Says even an unwanted peck on the cheek could be a battery. But here, Miss Carroll is alleging the R word. That's a form of battery. Now, you may have heard about this concept called statute of limitations. Last year, though, New York revived the ability to bring a suit for sexual misconduct. So they extended the statute of limitations by statute. They said, is there anything we can do to go after Trump? Perfect. Let's pass this bill, and then we can bring up a new claim. So the judge told them that. So you guys don't need to worry about why this case is so old. You've already heard about the statute of limitations. It says, as jurors, just so you know, you're here, you cannot Google. You cannot tweet. I'm talking to you about BlackBerries. You just can't do that. If you become aware that another juror has done so, you have to let me know. You got to go through Andy, my bailiff, my court clerk here, and try not to form any opinion until the end of this trial. It says we're going to have opening statements now. And says to me, opening statements, ladies and gentlemen, are kind of like movie trailers. Sometimes they're an accurate advertisement of what's going to happen in the film, sometimes not. Clear? Jurors like, yeah, we understand. All right, who's up here first? Who's opening for the plaintiffs for E. Jean Carroll? And this person is called Crowley, lawyer for E. Jean Carroll. Miss Crowley. She says, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take you back to 1996. Whoa, that's a long time ago. Miss Carroll was leaving Bergdorf Goodman's. She ran into Trump, who she knew, and he asked her to help him choose a gift, some kind of lingerie. And they were in a dressing room, and when they went in there, Donald Trump pulled down her tights and assaulted her. And it was a horrendous ordeal. But Miss Carroll got away from that incident, from that attack. And she told two friends. Later, she swore them to secrecy. She said, don't you dare tell anybody about this, that I told you this. But eventually, her silence became impossible. In 2017, she began to write a book. She wanted to turn it into a memoir. And she included a chapter in there about Trump's assault. In Trump's response to the book, Trump was president, of course, back in 2017. His response was explosive. From the White House, he said, she's not my type. And we know what that means. She's too ugly to assault. He branded her a liar and a fraud. I'm proud to represent Miss Carroll in this trial. This is a roadmap, and I'm going to share it with you, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump assaulted her in 1996. Then he defamed her. You're going to hear all about it. And Donald Trump responded with vicious lies meant to destroy her. You'll hear from others, ladies and gentlemen, and her friends. You'll hear from two Bergdorf employees and Miss Carroll's sister, the former boss at Elle magazine. Miss Carroll came from Indiana, and she sold her first piece of writing at age 36. She decided to move to New York. She wrote for Saturday Night Live in the mid-90s. She had an Ask E. Jean segment. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear Miss Carroll testify here in this trial. She's going to tell you that she finished filming her TV show in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and then she went over to Bergdorf's. She headed to the exit on 58th Street just as Donald Trump was coming in. This was before he was even on The Apprentice. And Trump recognized her. She was a well-known writer at the time, and Trump said, hey, you're that advice lady. Miss Carroll said, hey, you're that real estate tycoon. She agreed to help Trump with a present. Now, he suggested lingerie on the 6th floor, but it was empty. Trump picked up a bodysuit and told Miss Carroll to try it on. And you may ask, why on earth would Miss Carroll let Donald Trump lead her into a dressing room? That's weird. She blamed herself for that. It's true. But at the time, she thought the random encounter was funny. She didn't see him as a threat. But she was wrong. When they got in there, Trump banged the door closed. He was a big man, had easily 100 pounds on her. He jammed his hands up and into her, and he forced his, inside of her. They say it lasted a few minutes, and she fled. You're going to hear from her, and she's going to describe it all. I expect you're going to listen to her and find her to be credible and convincing. Now, Miss Carroll's going to admit that she doesn't recall the day or the month. She thinks it was a Thursday. In the spring, she had no coat. And let me be clear, it does not rest solely on her testimony, this case. There's more here, not just Carroll. You'll hear from Bergdorf employees at the time. She ran out onto Fifth Avenue. She pulled out her cell phone. Yeah, they had them in the 90s. And called her friend, Miss Birnbach. She told Miss Birnbach about her tights being pulled down and about being penetrated. And she told Miss Birnbach, never speak of it again. Miss Carroll told Miss Martin, who advised her to stay quiet, that Trump was too powerful. Miss Carroll was born in 1943. She was part of the Grin and Bear It generation. Her sister's going to tell you that. And we have another expert on that too, Dr. Leibowitz, who's going to come here. Miss Carroll was interviewing women about their experience with men. And at the time, the allegation arose against a famous Hollywood movie producer. It was time to share things that had happened to her. She made a list, but she held off on including Trump. Eventually, an excerpt was published in the New York Magazine. Trump said he never met her. He threatened that she will pay dearly. He said, she's not my type. Using the most powerful platform on earth, and many people believed him. And then in 2022 on Truth Social, Trump called Miss Carroll's story a con job and a hoax. She lost readers and she lost fans. And you're going to hear that Miss Carroll is not the only woman that he did this to. You're going to hear him on a hot mic. You're going to hear Trump saying, when you're a star, you can do anything. You can grab him by the, whoa. He says, this was not locker room talk. It's what he actually did. You'll hear from two other women that Trump assaulted. One on a plane in 1979. Trump also called her a liar. And you'll hear from a People magazine reporter who went on a Mar-a-Lago in 2005, who Trump pushed against the wall. In 2016, she shared her story, and Trump insulted her. He said, go look at her. I don't think so. You're going to hear Trump lie in a deposition. He said he never bought gifts at Bergdorf. It's a lie. Trump has said, I never met her. That's a lie too. And so the question is about whether Donald Trump was lying in October. And at the end of the trial, we'll speak to you again. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Judge says we'll take a 10-minute break, and they're back. Now, Trump's lawyer is up, and this is Joe Tacopina, who we've covered here. He delivers opening arguments. He says, ladies and gentlemen, people have strong feelings about Donald Trump, one way or another. And it's okay to feel however you feel. That's okay. You can hate Donald Trump. It's okay. You can express that at a ballot box, but not here in a court of law. He says, well, no one is above the law. No one is beneath the law either. Politicians don't make this country great. Jurors do. And Trump's sitting here. He's like, well, my whole slogan is make America great again. What? What are you doing? If you follow the facts, justice will be served. What is paramount is the rule of law, ladies and gentlemen. And what E. Jean Carroll is doing here today in this courtroom is an affront to justice. She is exploiting actual, true victims for money. You cannot let her profit off of her abuse of this process. This case must be decided on the evidence. And let's look at her story. In some unknown season, she said 1995 or 96, she said that she was violently attacked in a dressing room in a Bergdorf's. She would have you believe that Donald Trump was going to try on lingerie over his pantsuits. These other two never made a claim. E. Jean Carroll's story is unbelievable. The other people that the government's going to parade, they didn't bring a claim either. Says E. Jean's story is so unbelievable, they use a foolish statement 20 years ago, locker room talk. The same clip that was paraded all over the media. It's not an admission, they say. They put up tweets, a 25-year-old quote. Tweets from someone who may or may not have even been a Trump supporter. They say that Bergdorf witnesses are going to confirm every detail of this assault. They said that. You mark those words. They said that. What are they going to confirm? That they went to a lingerie department? Ladies and gentlemen, just buckle in. You're going to be here for a wild ride and listen to their story. The opening statement is supposed to be a promise, not a politician's promise. But let's talk about the lack of details they're presenting you here today. E. Jean Carroll can't even tell you the date, not the month, not the season, not even the year this happened. She doesn't want to give Donald Trump the opportunity to provide an alibi. There's no date. We can't refute anything. Instead, she says that she was AR'd on some unknown day, 27 or 28 years ago. 8 or 9 years before that, they were at a gala. Trump was with John Johnson, Channel 11. E. Jean Carroll says they took escalators up to the 6th person, but she didn't see a single other person, not a soul. It was like The Walking Dead up there. She says Donald Trump picked up a piece of lingerie. The dressing room are usually locked, but not now, though. She says that Donald Trump lunged at her, that the noise was so loud that anyone on the floor would have heard it. And how did she react? She left, she says. Her story continues that Trump attacked her for up to 3 minutes. She's on high heels and she pushed him off. And she somehow held onto her purse. She never screamed. She rode the escalator down, saw no one, walked out of the store, and can produce no objective evidence of any of this. No record of injuries, no doctor, no therapist, no video preserved. What you've heard here, ladies and gentlemen, is a fabulous story about what a fabulous writer she was. But there's nothing in her diary. There's no police report. She was an advice columnist who told her readers to report men to the police. She once called the police on teenagers who vandalized her mailbox, but she didn't write anything about this one down. We're going to learn that she says that she kept the dress for 25 years. She says she only realized that she was attacked until her friend told her about it. They were not, in fact, best friends. She would not have told either one of them. These are people who desire to be in the spotlight, these witnesses. All three of these people loathe Donald Trump politically. They schemed to turn Donald Trump and to turn on Donald Trump politically. Schemed. Martin emailed Carroll and said, "This has to stop," referring to Donald Trump. Carroll replies, "Yes. How can I help?" E. Jean Carroll came up with all of this, ladies and gentlemen, to sell a book. Why? To hurt Trump, to inject herself into the spotlight. Her life has never been better. She says she's been fabulous. She's making money. She's appearing on TV, all after the revelation of this very painful attack. She went on CNN and talked to Anderson Cooper. You'll see her basking in the spotlight. She became a celebrity and loved every minute of it. The story became the center of her life and her lifestyle. She called him an attacker. Of course he exploded. Evidence is going to show that E. Jean Carroll is, in fact, lying. At a party, she met an attorney who we talked about called George Conway, a very big critic of Donald Trump, who spoke to her about suing. Objection. And the judge sustains it. Jury disregard that. This is where they're getting into the funding and seeking advice of counsel. A lot of that stuff is typically off limits. You'll hear that if Donald Trump is faced with so many lawsuits, that he's not going to be able to run for president. But the stories don't match up. Him calling her a liar is the truth. She suffered no harm. To the contrary. In fact, our defense will come up with their own witnesses. It says our defense will come from their witnesses. Their witnesses. That's our entire defense. We have some sworn testimony from Donald Trump that you're going to see in his own oath video deposition. And says, I don't want to detract from the focus of her story. He says some snarly things. That's understandable. But ladies and gentlemen, you have to decide if you believe the story or not. At the end, decide on the evidence, not the politics. If you do, Miss Carroll will not be able to deceive you. She gives a walking tour, the most hideous men in New York talking tour, to sell her book. She stops in front of Trump Tower. She smiles from ear to ear. Thank you for indulging. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all for me now. The judge says, okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much here of the jury. You're done for the day. We'll come back tomorrow with our first witness. You are excused. So the jury leaves and the judge asks Trump's lawyer, says, Mr. Tacopina, so your client's not going to testify in person? He says, gosh, I don't know. I don't know. And he says, yeah, you can look at me that way, Judge. Sorry, I don't know. So Tacopina is keeping this open, right? He wants this possibility of Trump coming in here and causing a bunch of chaos to remain open as long as possible. Because you don't know. Maybe you do want Donald Trump to come in here personally. Kind of depends what happens here. So the judge wants to get him on the record now. So he's not going to come here in person, right? Like that's going to save us a lot of headache. Lawyer says, well, I don't know. Maybe he will, maybe not. Maybe it depends on how you rule on some issues, Judge. The transcript says, dodge Trump. You cannot leave it hanging. The time has to come. You have to tell me this week. He says, obviously, this is an imposition on court staff and security. He says, that's not my intention, Judge. I don't have my phone with me. He said, you got your George Conway story in. This judge, we've covered this judge before here on this channel. This judge is going to be probably a hoot. So Judge Kaplan, you got your George Story Conway in. Punk. Get out of here. All right. So That was it. That is day one, my friends, of the Trump trial. And let me know in the comments if you want us to stay covering this one or jump to other cases, because it's going to warm up. It is a civil trial. It is going to be spicy, but it's probably also going to be ridiculous because it is a ridiculous witch hunt case. So let me know if you want us to stay covering this down in the comments below. But of course, that was day one. Regardless of what happens, this is going to be part of a big onslaught against Donald Trump, and we're going to continue to cover all of it and more.